welcomes the membership of Ukraine in NATO and by the Prime Minister. Here.
We understand that Russia is one of the most powerful countries in the world, and we see that they've been taking selfish acts in the event where they want to get more power, when they want to get more, when they want to get more military power, and we've seen that inside when they were able to fund Bashar al-Assad because they want to protect their military status in Syria. And we think that all these reasons are reasons why we need to protect Ukraine, because Ukraine has been under extreme pressure from Russia, and we fear to the extent where they are able to control Ukraine is the point where Ukrainians will have to go through a life of dictatorship. We don't want that. We want a world where these countries, even if they want to attack each other, they are unable to do so. We think that that is the comparison we make inside this debate. So let's talk about NATO. So what is NATO? So we understand that NATO is a military organization that comprises of a lot of countries when we talk about the US. And we think that the NATO is very powerful and has been contributing a lot to status quo. You can see in Afghanistan, when Barack Obama took away all the troops that he could from Afghanistan, and now since leaders have changed, they have been requesting for more soldiers from NATO, from the people on the ground in Afghanistan. We see that people rely on NATO, but not just because it is a military power, because it is a place where all countries have to comply to a certain rule that they cannot attack each other, and they have to comply that they won't attack each other due to the circumstances that will exist. So Ukraine, what is Ukraine? Ukraine is the country that resides beside Russia. And the reason why I want to take this away is because Russia feels so powerful that it's able to take over Ukraine. We don't want that. We see that under these circumstances where Ukraine is usually not seen as a powerful force, we see that it's easy for Russia to take these countries out. So let's talk about my first argument on why it's important to protect Ukraine, right? So why specifically Ukraine? We see that Ukraine is under extreme pressure. So this is existed, and this is why we need to do it, because we can see that South Korea is constantly harassing North Korea is constantly harassing South Korea, and there's a reason why that country has a nuclear umbrella to protect it, because they are scared, and other countries don't want to start or wage wars against other countries. We think it's harmful. We think we want to protect countries by implementing these kind of factors, and we think that NATO is one of the best reasons, and we think it's better than a nuclear umbrella, and we think it's much more better under these circumstances. Before that, sure.
When 9/11 terrorists in the US were thought to be sheltered in Afghanistan, NATO waged war in Afghanistan. When Ukraine insurgents are thought to be supported by Russia, what's to stop the entire NATO from waging war with Russia?
Okay, we see that firstly, we don't want war to exist, but secondly, the problem with Russia is not because it's so powerful, it's not only because it's so powerful, but the reason why they find it's not to frame Ukraine or blame them is the reason because they want to control Ukraine. Russia had no want to blame Ukraine or frame them for the things that they have done. They want to make sure that they are able to fight dictatorship inside Ukraine, to be able to control Ukraine as far as their own. And we think that people on the ground in Ukraine are more likely to be harmed under these circumstances. Now, how does it help? So we understand that NATO is very powerful. So the point in time where Ukraine is allowed to enter is the point in time where it's harder for Russia to take over. Because the probable reason why Ukraine does not enter is because no one is actually celebrating, or nobody wants them inside NATO. Because we see that the reason why they don't voice out is the reason because they are scared that Russia might attack them. They are scared that Russia will slide dictatorship into them. We see that the point in time where we make it open that, look, Ukraine, you can join us, you can join NATO, you can supply weapons to us, is the point in time where it's the point in time where Ukraine can voice out their ideas. The point in time where Ukraine does not need to be scared. And we think that's great because we don't want Russia to always be in power. It's gone too far. It's gone to the extent where they are able to make wrong decisions that they think are right, like funding Bashar al-Assad and all these kinds of reasons. And we think that there's something that's really hard to do, and we think that's something that's really detrimental, and we need to protect Ukraine inside these circumstances. So let's go on to the main contention on why this is so important. Like, why should we give a damn about Ukraine, right? But the thing is, we don't. We want to protect the reason why we want Ukraine in NATO is because we don't give a damn about, because we give a damn about Russia. We don't want Russia to have more power over countries that they can control. We don't want Russia to be able to supply more money to Bashar al-Assad just because of the reason that they don't want to stop the war, but under the reason that they want to constantly protect their military power and the military base in Syria. We think that under those circumstances, it's extremely harmful and it's completely difficult for us to maintain those kind of things. But why is it important? Because if we concede that Ukraine is a powerful force, and if Ukraine does have nuclear weapons and all these kind of things, it's easier to check up on that, and there's more transparency that exists. Because we understand that countries such as North Korea, who have nuclear weapons, do not allow people from outside to check on their weapons. There is an organization that checks on nuclear weapons, and that country does not allow it. Under these circumstances, when NATO is present and you are in NATO, it becomes easier for transparency to exist. It's easier to see if the decision we made was right. Because the point in time where Ukraine does not fund NATO, does not help NATO, is the point in time where we are able to realize what we've done wrong, right? So we think that we have more power in NATO. It becomes easier to give troops in Syria, to give troops in Afghanistan. And under those circumstances, it's better. Because not only do you have more diplomatic ties, but even if Ukraine does not increase their diplomatic ties with Russia, they still cannot hate each other. Sure, they might hate each other like inside, but they can't they can't change the fact that they are unable to fight or wage wars. Russia now cannot show Ukraine that they are the stronger country because they are in alliance. And we think that's something we fight for. We want Ukraine to be protected.
Thank you very much for that speech. I invite the Leader of Opposition.
The stance in the opposition side is simple. Firstly, we want to support NATO, but we think that the strategy of welcoming Ukraine into NATO is harmful. But secondly, we also want to control Russia, but we think that this debate is a question of which side controls Russia more. The standards of debate is as follows. Firstly, where do you get regional stability? It's a question of where is it better for Ukraine? Where do you best suppress conflicts? But secondly, where is it better for NATO? We think that this was completely missing from them. We think that there are goals that NATO wants to achieve,
longevity, and regional stability within its member countries. What is our model? Firstly, we're going to continue with economic sanctions and international sanctions. We think that this is working on status quo, which they completely neglected. The reason why Russia is poor currently is because of economic sanctions. We prevent their access to oil, and because naturally oil prices are going down, we think that Vladimir Putin is losing his approval rating with the people. And we think that the people have less incentive to invest in the military that Russia wants to wage on NATO because of those economic conditions that they're poor. Two responses to the case. First, they said that you're going to they said that Russia will more likely abuse Ukraine more, and that's why it necessitates their policy. But the reason why that's completely convenient is because they ignore the fact that Ukraine is composed of Russian soldiers. Ukraine is composed of pro-Russian people, and that's the reason why Russia isn't completely abusive of Ukraine right now, because it just wants them as a buffer zone between them and NATO. That's why I'm going to prove why that's completely harmful, and why if you try to take away the buffer zone, you're going to aggravate Russian aggressions. No, thank you. But secondly, they told you about how Ukraine has more incentive now to go against Russia because they have NATO backing. Exactly. I'm going to prove why this is completely harmful. First argument on the conflict of Ukraine. I want to give a historical background on how insurgencies in Ukraine are everywhere. We think that the reason why Ukraine was annexed by Russia in the first place was because it wanted to gravitate toward the EU. That's why Russia took the step forward to take Ukraine and annex it, because it was gravitating towards the EU. Notice the similarity. If Ukraine shows any sign of gravitation towards NATO, that means that Russia will more likely increase their aggressions on NATO. Why is this so? But let's establish first the fact. Why will NATO intervene in the first place? Using the premises. Because Article 5 mandates you that if a country goes to war with another country, that means that the country within NATO can intervene. And we think that this intervention, because Russia is now part of NATO, that gives them more justification to intervene in Ukraine. And because Russia has taken Ukraine, that's worse. Second premise, I'm going to prove why it's more likely or not, and this is as opposed to their arguments, why Russia won't back off. Firstly, I'll give you a historical analysis. Because Russia has a history of protecting its people outside of Russia. It has a world, like for example, for one reason, it's Slavic nationalism. Slavic nationalism, that they both share common identity with Ukraine. That's why no matter on both sides, Russia will still likely invade Ukraine. But Russia will still likely aggress on Ukraine. But secondly, I'm going to talk about how Russia needs Ukraine as a buffer zone. No, thank you. The reason why Russia isn't completely abusive to Ukraine right now is because they need Ukraine as a buffer zone from Western countries. If you look at the map, on the right side is Russia, on the middle is Ukraine, on the left side are these EU countries. We think that the reason why they're treating Ukraine as good right now is because they need a buffer zone. So what happens if you take away that buffer zone? If you take away their only line of defense against these EU countries, that means that Russia will more likely intervene in NATO. No, thank you. But thirdly, because there's justification for NATO to intervene, because they are subjected to the laws, and the laws mandate you to intervene if a country is in war with Russia, because Russian aggression is present in NATO, that means NATO will intervene in Ukraine. What does that lead to? It leads to more proxy wars. It leads to NATO funding more groups in Ukraine to counter Russian influence. What does that do? Russia will more likely intervene and arm their pro-Russian people. It's not going to be only a topic about, regional strikes. It's only going to be a topic of proxy wars. And we think that this is harmful because it leads to an escalation of conflict, something I'm going to talk about in my second argument. But before I move on,
NATO countries cannot attack NATO countries because they have an alliance. So even if Russia wants to attack Ukraine, it's impossible. Secondly, the reason why Russian soldiers are inside Ukraine is the main problem. Explain how that's not harmful.
I've already conceded that Russian soldiers are in Ukraine. But secondly, that's false, right? I'm not saying that NATO will go to war with Ukraine. I'm saying that NATO will intervene if they have a stake in Ukraine. Those are two separate things. Second argument on its long-term implication. First premise on global security, on how this results in stockpiling nukes. We think that in status quo, what's working is that people are discussing about humanitarian crisis and how to address problems from an inhumane from a humane perspective of how economic sanctions and not directly intervening in stockpiling news. We think that this is a zero-sum game. If you talk more about humanity, if you talk more about intervention on your side, which is justified, but you expect a response from deputy, we think that that's completely harmful. But secondly, they talked about how Russia has a stake in Syria. I'm going to talk more about this. Third argument on how any act that justifies humanitarian crisis by the United Nations and the NATO will most likely not pass. Why? Because I've proven to you Russian aggression. And we think that because there is Russian aggression, it's less likely for you to intervene. Why? Two reasons why. Firstly, Russia is part of the United Nations Security Council. And let's establish the fact that NATO has intervened in several countries and that has been given its mandate by the United Nations, which means if the United Nations doesn't approve of intervention in other countries, that means NATO is paralyzed, it's left as a lame duck. That means on your side, Russia will most likely vote against the United Nations Security Council and in a humanitarian crisis. But secondly, Russia has a stake in Syria and Libya and all these Middle Eastern countries. It has funded Bashar al-Assad and it has helped Gaddafi. And we think that because you're coordinating with them right now, because you're going to try to appeal to their good side by not escalating tensions, by not taking an important country that belongs to them, we think that you get better coordination. You can solve these humanitarian crises more because both sides that have stakes in that country will coordinate with each other and we'll talk about how to best resolve. We think that the reason why NATO is currently succeeding in status quo against its economic sanctions against Russia is for two reasons. Because firstly, Russia has no incentive to intervene against Ukraine right now. But secondly, about how they can pass on the crisis on our side. We're very proud to oppose.
Thank you for that speech. I invite the Deputy Prime Minister.
Understanding that Russia is one of the most influential and most powerful country in the world, we believe that we have to take extreme measures against Russia in order to stop them from constantly expanding power to begin with. Not stick to status quo, stick to economic sanctions which side opposition believes will control Russia to begin with, right? Why so? Let's just take a look at Russia. We believe that they have one of the strongest military forces because they have thousands of tanks and modern technologies in order to invade Ukraine to begin with. Secondly, we also believe that it goes against humanitarian reasons to expand their power, which means they are willing to take extreme measures just for the sake of expanding their power. So understanding that this is the nature of Russia, it is impossible for us to use economic sanctions, which they wanted to talk about, to control Russia to begin with. We believe that the only alternative to control Russia and the best method to begin with is to use other military forces form together, for example, NATO, where we have UK, France, America, join forces together to protect Ukraine and stop Russia to begin with. Because this is when Russia realized that every single country in NATO are going to join forces and kick them out of NATO if it goes against the rules of NATO to invade Ukraine to begin with. We believe that this is the only alternative that we can actually control Russia to begin with. No tactics. Let's just take a look at a couple of rebuttals and issues which came out from their side, right? Firstly, they wanted to talk about how Russia will abuse Ukraine more since now Ukraine has the incentive to join this kind of NATO, right? We tell you that the point in which the NATO welcomes this membership of Ukraine and Russia abused them for it, this is when Russia is going against the rules of NATO. Why so? Because NATO welcomes the membership of Ukraine, which means they actually want Ukraine to join NATO. So the point in which Russia actually attacked this Ukraine simply because they want to join EU is not going to happen to begin with. Even if it happens, this is when other forces in NATO will try to find out what happens and talk to Russia to begin with, right? Moving on to the second issue on how these kind of laws won't pass in NATO itself. We believe that as long as the majority supports the laws which Ukraine brought up, we believe that this is when laws will still be passed, and we don't see how only Russia voting against it will stop these laws from passing to begin with. Moving on to the third issue, how Russia won't back off since they have Russian troops in Ukraine. Well, we can see to the fact, the point in which they have Russian troops in Ukraine means that Ukraine is in extreme danger because they want to invade Ukraine. So the point in which you do nothing and stick to economic sanctions with Russia, when they already have troops and military forces in your country, Ukraine is eventually going to be taken over by Russia. So let's just take a look at my first argument today. I'm going to extend my PM's argument on how Ukraine will be more protected. So understanding that now, if Ukraine is part of NATO, this is when they sign treaties and they will be alliance with all other forces in NATO such as UK and France. So this also means that Russia is now an alliance with Ukraine because they are also part of the NATO. So which means they principally are forbidden to attack Ukraine to begin with, because this is the rule of NATO. Secondly, other forces will also stop this Russia to actually attack Ukraine to begin with. If Russia insists in having these kind of Russian troops to stay in Ukraine to begin with, this is when other forces will take two actions against Russia: either kick Russia out of NATO or attack Russia to begin with. We believe this will curb and control Russia to begin with, because this is when Russia will lose out support from NATO, which is what they don't want to begin with, and they also believe, and Russia will also know that now UK and France are not able to go. They are not able to go against Ukraine. The support from NATO, such as UK and France, form together, right? That is why we believe that this is the only alternative for Russia to be controlled to begin with. Sure. Yeah.
United States, Greece, Britain, Estonia, Poland, France, Turkey, there are a lot of big countries in NATO, but Russia isn't one of them, sir. We're confronting you on your false matter. Resolve this.
We believe that these kind of forces, they are bound to abide to these kind of certain rules in NATO to begin with. Even if there are contradictions which are happening within the community of NATO, we believe that there are also check and balances from other forces to begin with to actually curb Russia from attacking and invading Ukraine to in the end of the day, right? Because the very burden of us, the only burden coming up from side government is to protect Ukraine to begin with. Because we believe that Ukraine is under extreme pressure for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we believe that they are beside the borders of Russia, and that is why Russia can easily send in troops to attack them. Fire missiles to bomb Ukraine, and it is also hard for Ukraine to defend Russia on themselves since they do not have such strong military forces. We tell you the only choice and the only alternative for Ukraine to protect themselves is to join NATO and gain support from NATO to begin with, right? We tell you the other benefit is how war is already on the run between Russia and Ukraine. People on the ground is already suffering and getting killed by the Russian troops. We believe that is why we must take immediate measures to welcome the membership of Ukraine in NATO in order to provide NATO with support and stop Russia from attacking them to begin with. Because understanding that Russia also has an influential power, especially in influencing their own Russians, which with propagandas, we believe that this is when Russians will also believe that what their government is doing is correct, and we believe that this also imposes external pressure onto Ukraine to begin with. That is why we believe that the only alternative and the best alternative for us to control Russia to begin with is to welcome the membership of Ukraine in NATO. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. I invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
government wants to tell us that the only alternative to Russian intervention and Russian support for insurgency in Ukraine is full-scale global war. We tell you that firstly, not only is that a solution to Ukraine's problem of actually having a war right now, but secondly, if you want to save Ukrainian lives, you probably shouldn't turn it into a battleground for the entire NATO versus Russia. Because by the way, Russia isn't part of NATO. But regardless of that piece of false pattern that they never really resolved, I'm going to tackle all of their arguments substantively, right? So what did they say? Their main line, case line, was we want to protect Ukraine because Ukraine is suffering. We gave to you several values how to win this debate already, something that they didn't respond to. Firstly, we want to protect NATO states. Secondly, we want to protect Ukraine. But thirdly, we also want to make Russia weaker, and that's where our idea of economic sanctions goes in. Because what did the previous speakers say? The first thing that they said is you want to curtail Russian influence and you want to make them weaker militarily. First response, if they annex parts of Ukraine, they aren't getting stronger militarily because they don't get more weapons. They don't really get more nuclear weapons because Ukraine doesn't have nukes. They don't really get anything, but they waste money on like bombs and funding for troops. So we don't really see why that happens. Secondly, we don't really see why that's a goal of NATO or like a goal in this debate in the first place. Is the primary goal really to counter Russian influence? Are you then going to like annex parts of Russia so they'll get smaller or something like that? So that's not really something that we think is of value. But thirdly, we think if it is a value for NATO to curtail Russian influence, and we think that sure, maybe that may be contestable, why is the answer necessarily war? Because we gave you analysis that economic sanctions are working. How? The support Vladimir Putin has right now sit down is a mixture of demagoguery and populism that rides on the support of people. The support of the people cannot be guaranteed when they're poor and starving because of a Russian economy that fails, because of an over-reliance on oil, an over-reliance on corruption, and a Russian economy that's being damaged by economic sanctions. Because by the way, they're working right now. Vladimir Putin's popularity ratings have dropped consistently since the prices of oil have been going down since we've been implementing sanctions. These are tangible reasons to actually counter-check Russia's influence. In fact, the only times Vladimir Putin's pop ratings surge is when he goes to war. It's when he paints an us versus them rhetoric of incredible and increasing Western expansionism versus Russian nationalism. In fact, when we said there are ethnic Russians in Ukraine that Vladimir Putin can use as a tool to actually justify his war for Ukraine, we tell you that you only increase the influence of Russia and you make it more likely that their decline will actually stop slowing down. Go.
Justify why Ukraine joining NATO would automatically start a war between Ukraine and Russia.
Okay, so firstly, Ukraine is already being attacked by Russia. So if it automatically joins NATO, then NATO has the responsibility to attack Russia. But say they engage in a ceasefire, right? Say maybe there's no more war right now, say status quo isn't happening. But there will always be some level of low-level insurgency in Ukraine because there are always pro-Russian nationalists in Ukraine. And we think that low-level insurgency is a basis for NATO intervention. It already has been in the past when the US intervened in Afghanistan, and it might continue to do so in the future if Ukraine uses it as a basis to actually invade Russia. So something that we proved never responded to. But secondly, on the protection of Ukraine. So what did they say? They said there are human rights abuses in Ukraine. Firstly, we think we mitigate this because we've proven to you that Russian interest in Ukraine isn't just tied to being against NATO, isn't just tied to a fear of NATO, but rather to forwarding of Russian interests also, like of the ethnic Russians on the ground level. So they probably have an incentive not to murder the people or not to chain them into slavery, because like aside from the idea that will get them even more economic sanctions from the international community, it will also lower their popularity because it hurts Russians on the ground. But secondly, they said, okay, NATO, if Ukraine joins NATO, then there will be no Russian intervention against Ukraine. But firstly, why is Russia necessarily afraid of NATO in this instance? We see Russia already treading the line between what is like considered as okay in the international community. We see Russia doing things like supporting Syria, even though the West is already against Syria. So why will they necessarily be afraid to invade Ukraine just because it joins NATO? Really proves to you that they're in fact more likely to invade Ukraine because they are part of NATO. If not only just to bolster Putin's popularity ratings, because he has engaged in a war that he can't necessarily pull out of. The resources that he has spent into funding insurgencies in Ukraine are quite massive in relation to how much money he actually has. So he pulls out right now. That isn't just a sign of weakness in the international community. That's a sign of weakness in his home country. And we think that, like, judging by the incentives of Russia, he probably won't want pulling out of Ukraine unilaterally because he's probably going to get kicked out of power because people think he's not a strong leader anymore. People won't think he's a reliable leader. So we think that on the first main issue, we've proven to you why it's highly likely for Russia to actually go to war with Ukraine, and it's just bad for the world in the long run because it creates international conflict. But secondly, how it paralyzes actions by the UN and any other humanitarian conflict, right? So because we see when NATO intervened in Kosovo, when NATO intervened in Bosnia, they were enforcing UN ceasefires and protecting the civilians on the ground. We think this can only happen when the UN Security Council doesn't necessarily veto their actions, when UN actions aren't paralyzed by Russia. Because NATO may not necessarily be an official part of the UN. But the US is a big part of NATO, and the US is a big part of the UN. And we've seen in the past that Russia really gets bitter about small conflicts with NATO and paralyzes and boycotts actions by the UN, and the US, just to make them less effective. So we think even if you take this in the broader scale and expand this debate to other theaters of war, we think actions to protect any humanitarian life or any actions that are against Russia will also be paralyzed because Russia will just continue to veto these actions and remove any support. And because we've proven to you on two levels. Firstly, how it's bad for the world because you create more conflict and conflict on a greater scale. But secondly, you paralyze humanitarian intervention and humanitarian action. We take this debate. Thanks.
Thank you. I invite the government.
The opposition side is more like an info slide. They just provide you with facts and expect people to accept your arguments. A debate is more of how you justify your ideas, not by just presenting facts. I'm going to prove to you on why the government side has taken this debate on three issues. On the first issue, Russia more. We believe that EU sanctioned Bashar al-Assad for getting oil. Even if that happened, Russia still continued funding. So we think that their whole argument of economic sanctions will not work because Russia still disregarded the fact that EU sanctioned Bashar al-Assad and still continued funding Syria for other sorts of issues. We think that it's much more likely for Russia to overthrow the EU sanctions because through this example, it's already proven that they do not listen and they do not care of what the sanctions or the economic sanctions, which is their alternative, does in society, in today's world. We believe that since Russia is already in Ukraine, we think that if Ukraine joins NATO, we think that they also have to pull the Russian soldiers out because we believe that now in Russia, in Ukraine, we think that the Russians are putting in soldiers slowly by slowly so that they can invade Ukraine in a more greater scale of magnitude. Believe that if Ukraine join NATO, then Russia will have to start pulling out their soldiers and so that so that they do not have to invade Ukraine, because Russia already know that NATO is a strong force and they're smart enough not to waste their resources into invading Ukraine. On the third level of analysis that they try to bring up to you on how Russia will go against NATO laws. We believe that you believe that it's easier for NATO to be for Ukraine to be protected. Why so? Because it's already proven to you on how Russia will more likely pull out their soldiers because they're scared that they're not able to that they cannot invade Ukraine simply for the fact of all those countries in NATO that they brought up in their POI. Do you really think that Russia is dumb enough to go into a big global war against all those countries and prove them that they are the greatest? We don't see how that's logical for Russians to do so. But even if they do so, we think that the Russians, even if they do so, we think that the Russians are more likely to lose out. Why so? Because the resources that the Russians have in comparative to this whole line of countries that they propose to have, we think that these countries in NATO is more likely to overthrow the resources and overthrow Russia, and that's when Russia will lose all their dignity, and you don't see how it is effective. We believe that the reason why Russia is so scared of NATO is because of the economic sanctions placed on Russia in itself. We believe that if NATO will be more effectively putting their economic sanctions so that Russia will not be able to increase their popularity ratings or increase their economic growth. On the second issue on who protects Ukraine better in two aspects. Firstly, on humanitarian aspects, we believe that on our side we protect Ukraine from more invasion. We believe that they themselves consider to the fact that invasion is happening. When they clearly have told you that there are more pro-Russian soldiers in Ukraine and Russia will not be so abusive. We believe that's a big contradiction which they brought up. When you say that Ukraine is being invaded by Russia, it means that Russia is being abusive towards you. And when you bring out the point that pro-Russian soldiers are there so that they won't be abusive, we don't see how their idea is contentious and their idea is principally consistent at the very beginning. We think that they also did not explain on how Ukraine want to fight because for the main reason they have pro-Russian people there. You think that when you have pro-Russian people there, it's less likely for you to start a fight and it's less likely for you to begin a war. Because if Russia are unable to pull out all their soldiers, that's when they think twice before harming their soldiers in the very first place, because they do not want to attack Ukraine with people who support Russia in the very first place, and your ratings will reduce even more. On the second level of analysis on international relations, we believe that this will help Ukraine to have more people supporting them as a whole. We believe that now Ukraine is not cared about in the world in comparison to many other countries. We believe that when now Ukraine joins NATO, that's when they have more support and that's when they gather more international ties within all these countries in NATO, and that's when Russia will back off. On the third issue is a comparison between alternatives, because we think that's the main contention in today's debate on NATO and side opposition's case on economic sanctions. Believe that economic sanctions, yes, it's doing something slightly, but we don't see how it is affecting it even more. Like I've already told you in my speech earlier, that Russia is still funding Bashar al-Assad and still funding the Syrians so that they don't lose their military dignity. We see that if, in comparison to our side of NATO, we see that the people in Ukraine are able to voice out, and when people in Ukraine are able to voice out, that's when NATO can put more economic sanctions, which are more stronger than your EU economic sanctions that you have brought out. Leave that in comparison, we think that is much rather better. On the fourth issue on who actually brings a better world as a whole, we see that on their side, they they are only propagating more war. Because when you stop a country from doing something, it's going to enrich them even more, and it's going to push them to the point where they want to have a war. There's a simple debate justification which they do not understand. The point at which you have a lot of support with other countries in itself, in an organization which is militarily strong to combat Russia, that's when you will succeed. If you are a person in Ukraine and you think, who should I support? I'll probably go side. Thank you.
And by the opposition leaders. So guys, the acoustics are a bit bad, so please speak to your teammates softly. Also, the only reason I told you to be quiet is because of the chair creaking and not like Go ahead, please.
Madam Chair, it's funny that government calls us an info slide. This just shows how much they need us because they don't know what they're talking about at the end of the day. I want to prove to you a few questions. It's really about how do we end the conflict. There are 3 ways to do so. Firstly, if you can invade the other country, meaning Russia, I'll tell you why that can't be possible. Secondly, if you can beat the other country in conflict, I'll also prove to you why that's not possible. And lastly, what they want to propose. They want to scare the other country and make Russia back off. I'm also going to prove to you why in all scenarios, they can never win. But before that, I want to do a few things. I want to address their argument on transparency, which came up from the first speaker, but they somehow dropped it. Okay, first of all, it's a linear case. Everything relied on the premise that NATO can liberate Ukraine and make sure it's peaceful. That's when you can actually check on it. So the moment you prove to you, it's gonna go to a proxy war, a civil war. When it becomes worse, you can't have transparency on their side. So I just want to tell you that. Secondly, I want to solve a contradiction. They say we're contradicting ourselves when we say Russia will protect its own citizens and there won't be a war. False, because Russia has its own citizens and has pro-Russia people there, but opposing sides are not pro-Russia. So I'm sorry, they're still going to invade and they're still going to fight the other side. Firstly, where is Ukraine better off? The first thing I want to solve is, can we invade the other country? Can we attack Russia? They say that firstly, other forces or like the whole NATO will attack Russia, therefore we win. Sounds good, just not good enough. Okay, so firstly, even if everyone goes in, you can't still beat Russia because this is theory called mutually assured destruction. So Russia can nuke all of you and you still can't beat them. That's how nukes work. Even if I send 10 nukes, you might like burn the earth under the score, but you still nuke the people. So yeah, they won't invade Russia. But secondly, Russia also has alliances, right? We think China can go with Russia, and when they combine as forces, then you can counter NATO. So in that case, how do they end the conflict on their side? No. Given that you cannot end the conflict, the best way now to approach this debate is what's the best way to keep Ukraine stable? We have to concede. Ukraine right now is not as stable, we have to admit, but it's more stable than the world they propose. They gave the example of Syria. Funny because that's our whole premise. There's a proxy war in Syria because US is aggressive and so is Russia. That's why Syria is so bad right now. Can they resolve this? No. Why? Let's talk about incentives as to why Russia won't collapse. Because they say that you can scare Russia out of the conflict and they'll be scared because they have so many resources. Untrue. Why? One, Russia already has made significant progresses in Ukraine. For instance, turning vast insurgencies. That's why it has the upper hand right now, which they conceded this in the first speaker. I'd say that's how they got their rhetorical question as to why we should help Ukraine, right? So they conceded this. The thing is, it's in the same way, Syria, Russia also made significant progresses. That's why there's proxy war there. That's why it's the war there is so bad, because Russia already has made significant progresses with Assad. But secondly, we talk about buffer zones. So they're not likely to back off because they need buffer zones. You already know how important this is for countries like China and Russia. That's why China can never let go of North Korea because it also serves as a buffer zone. How do I paint a picture about this? Because imagine Russia and NATO's border, and Ukraine's border. Now imagine NATO troops being stationed near that border. How do you think Russian citizens will feel? How do you think Russian officials will feel? It is a massive threat. They will never let go of Ukraine because now. But fine. They'll just admit that it might just somehow happen. Even if that were the case, citizens are tied by a common identity and nationalism to people who are also pro-Russia in Ukraine. Given they're all tied by the same nationality, they will inevitably tell the president to invade Ukraine and annex it because they want to. So what does this do? It leads to a proxy war. It leads to more funding. NATO now, which they say is compelled by Article 5 to have a collective system of defense thing. Now they're gonna directly clash with each other through proxy wars. They're gonna focus all their funding. Now Russia will become more aggressive. They're gonna put all their funding towards these insurgencies. What does this do? One, the clashes become from weekly clashes become daily clashes. It becomes more fatal. Citizens will die more. But more than that, we think even if the conflict's really bad right now, it's gonna get worse on your side. When Russia starts using chemical weapons, when they start using weapons of mass destruction, because they're so aggressive right now, and the tension between the US and NATO and Russia is so great. That's when the war becomes worse, because now you're resorting to bombs, you're resorting to chemical weapons, and you have daily clashes to kill almost everyone. That's when the war in their head becomes worse. We can see it to all possibilities and all scenarios. We think the fight will just get worse. They have proven no analysis as to why the Ukraine can somehow be liberated. On the Congress, right? We have proved to you how our side can help the conflict. We say we can see our side can be slow in the conflict. But it's better to be slow than to be rash like them. Why? We gave you premises as to why Russia's economy is really stagnating, right? We think its economy is really going down. Meaning, people who subscribe to Vladimir Putin's rhetoric when annexing Ukraine will probably not like it as much. They're probably not going to vote for him in the next election. They're probably not going to support his kind of government. Given this, Russia can slowly pull out. But then they say, no, in Syria, it's not happening because it's not pulling out. The response is this. We introduced you a new premise because we read news. We told you that Russia's economy is going down. So at the very least, if it's going down, in the future, they won't have enough money to fund the insurgencies. They won't have enough money to fund the groups. So at the very least, the conflict will slowly die down. This is a new premise no one engaged with at the debate. So given this, it will work. It will be slow, but at least the conflict will remain stable. It will slowly die down. On their side, they aggravate Russia and they make Russia more aggressive. Russia will put all their funding there, make sure they beat and make sure they turn Ukraine into hell on earth. So secondly, we talked about our extremely important extension they have not responded to. We told you about NATO's humanitarian role in the world. We think if they want to help Ukraine, that means the principle is they also want to help the world, the people, because the way they characterize Ukraine is that they're innocent people. So given the underlying principle behind the argument, we want to help other people, they also have to help other people, like in Syria or in Bosnia and Kosovo. We don't it's a zero-sum game. When NATO directs all its resources to funding this war with Russia and Ukraine, we think you can't stop other humanitarian efforts in other places. Given those, you contradict your own principle because other people will suffer because of this war. But secondly, right, even if we think Russia, when you make Russia more aggressive, when you directly clash with Russia, it probably will veto all NATO operations given by the UN through the UNSC. So at the end of the day, what does this mean? We think what's better for Ukraine is where Russia is more stable, can slowly make the conflict die down. Not when you rashly, not when you automatically be so aggressive to Russia. In turn, you're gonna make Ukraine yourself. Well, I'm very proud of the post.
Thank you very much. I invite the opposition replies. Yes.
We agree when government says debate isn't just about matter, but it's about how you use it. And that's why we engaged on their frame, something exclusive to opposition bench, and something that never really was responded to. Because I'm going to adjudicate this debate based on two issues. Firstly, on the idea of burden fulfillment, and secondly, on the idea of engagement. First issue. So we think the huge burden that government chose to take on themselves was they have to prove how to save Ukraine, how to prevent any insurgency, and at the same time prevent any possibility of this escalating into global war. What did they say? Firstly, we had a really shaky and weird kind of characterization of Russia being part of NATO. So if Ukraine is also part of NATO, Russia can also not attack Ukraine. I mean, notwithstanding the idea that Russia doesn't seem to follow any rules in general, that's just false matter. But then what do they say coming from the second speaker, right? Because pretty late into his speech, he said, maybe Russia is afraid of NATO. And this was highlighted in their whip when he said, if NATO has so many countries, why would Russia still be afraid of them? But if you said previously that Russia is incredibly powerful, Russia is scary and won't listen to the world, then why would they be afraid of all of these other nations? And in fact, we gave to you other reasons why Russia is highly likely to escalate this conflict. We said firstly, that Russia has incentives in Ukraine. That secondly, the irrational mindset of Putin makes it highly likely for him to just continue supporting the insurgency just because he doesn't want to get pulled out of power. But thirdly, we said even if Russia doesn't go to war with Ukraine, we said Ukraine will go to war on Russia because that's also part of your burden. If you say that Ukraine is also anti-Russia and that the only reason that they're not attacking Russia right now is because they're afraid, because they have a lack of military capability, then if they have NATO support, won't they be more likely to go to war with Russia? Something we said never responded to. So we've proven to you the burden of how you don't save Ukraine because you escalate conflict and make global war more likely. But secondly, we engage in their idea and their burden of saving people in general because they went the kind of rhetorical empathy kind of debate when they said, well, we want to help people who are oppressed, help people on the ground. But we said that aside from the idea that nuclear war will probably kill more people than any kind of Russian intervention ever, we also said that Russian boycotting of various humanitarian actions will cause people in other nations to die, in other nations to suffer. People who are probably more likely going to suffer under regimes of oppressive dictators than people who are ethnically Russian being annexed by Russia. But secondly, on the idea of engagement, because we think we've, just because we've won both those burdens and we've proven them, then we take this debate. But secondly, on the idea of engagement. Because even if they've given false matter and strange characterizations and one-dimensional analysis of how Russia is scary, Russia is irrational, NATO is strong, we've given to you several layers of characterization and engagement. Even if Russia is incredibly powerful, this is bad. Even if NATO is incredibly strong, Ukraine is highly likely to just drag NATO into a war. Even if people on the ground are suffering, the very fact that we have less people suffering on our side, and when the actor is actually NATO, and the principle of NATO is we don't want NATO states to get hurt, even on that issue alone, we take this debate. So, because we've proven to you on several levels how, firstly, NATO states probably don't want to go to war. Secondly, war is generally bad for people all around the world. And thirdly, how we save more lives in and out of Ukraine, we take this debate. Thanks.
Thank you. I invite the government to rise.
So we'll clear things up for you, panel, because their side was the side that wanted to fight the wrong fight. So I'm going to explain how Thai government, regardless of the false matter we gave, was still able to win this debate, right? So this debate fell into the biggest issue and the issue on who controls Russia. And we think that the team that is able to prove that wins this debate. Because they dropped it. They dropped it from PM and said that, oh, all we have is sanctions and sanctions are okay. But we already told you, but that's not enough. And they conceded to the fact that there are Russian troops inside Ukraine, and these Russian troops are harassing Ukraine, not only taking down the insurgency, but in that line also control the Ukrainians. They conceded to that. But we also find this one thing funny, right? Because we don't know what they're fighting for. Do they want to fight for Russia being more powerful? Do they want to fight for Ukraine being protected? We don't know what that burden is. Because despite the fact that the reply told you that they've solved that burden, it's not true. Because you can't solve a burden that's not there, right? So let's talk about the first issue, right? Which is the most important one, right? So who controls Russia the most? So they came up here and said that, oh, there's sanctions. But they also consider that Russia is really powerful. So what will these sanctions do if Russia is that powerful? But we also told you that NATO is just as powerful. And we told you that Russia is not interested in losing a fight that they know they will lose. They are not interested in losing the fight that they will lose most of their resources. Because even if that Russia is able to get supplies from China and all their allies, it's going to take a hell of a long time to rebuild from the war and the massacres from NATO and Russia. But here's the weird thing, right? Because they told you that the point in time when Ukraine joins NATO is the point in time where war will break out. We don't think so. Just because Ukraine joins NATO, it doesn't mean that Russia is going to get more aggressive. It just means that Russia, even if they do get more aggressive, they can't fight Ukraine. Because it means that if they need to fight Ukraine, they're going to have to wage war on the whole NATO organization. And we don't think that's true. So who wins this issue on who controls Russia more? We do. Because even if Russia is more aggressive, at least we can prevent them from causing fighting with Ukraine. At least we can prevent them from causing more Ukrainians' lives lost. We prevent that. This does not happen under their side. Because if their burden firstly is to protect Ukrainians, this does not happen. But if their second burden is to prove that how Russia is so powerful and all these things does not happen, it also it goes against their side also. Because if Russia is that powerful, they don't care about Ukraine, they don't care about sanctions. What they do care about, and what any country cares about, is how to rebuild their society back after an enormous massacre that will occur when a war rages. Because their reply already considered that they don't want war, that they don't want fights. And I think all countries in the world want that. And I think that's something problematic under their side. They say that we gave false matter and all that kind of stuff. Well, false matter isn't as bad as having a bad argument. And we think that the argument that came from their side was that, oh look, Russia is strong, but sanctions are going to help them to stop being aggressive. We don't think so. The contention from that is really the problems under their side. Sure, they gave a lot of arguments, but they didn't solve the problem that existed under their side. All they did was to prove to you how our side was bad. At least under our side, we were able to prove some benefits under status quo. Their side was never able to prove that. They just kept harping on harms and harms and harms. But at least under our side, Russia cannot be more aggressive. Russia cannot attack Ukraine. But even if Russia is more aggressive, you can't attack Ukraine with NATO in their way.
Thank you very much for the debate. Please cross the floor to shake hands.
Good day, man.